bell above the door jingled softly as an elderly man stepped into Ladingo's Fine Dining, the town's most upscale restaurant. Known for its exclusivity and charm, Ladingo's prided itself on serving only the finest patrons, those with deep pockets and influential names. Dressed in a worn wool coat and scuffed leather shoes, the man paused, scanning the gleaming chandeliers and neatly set tables. Despite his warm smile and the hint of wonder in his eyes, he was met with sidelong glances and a few hushed whispers from the waitstaff. His face held a touch of awe, as though he hadn't seen such a grand place in a long time. A hostess, busy flipping through her reservation book, finally glanced up, offering a tight smile. She looked him up and down, taking in his outdated coat, his weathered hands, and his simple appearance. "May I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone formal, though barely masking her disinterest. "Just a table for one, please," he replied with a polite nod, his voice soft but sincere. The hostess's smile grew thin, and she straightened slightly, her fingers still on the reservation pages. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked today." Her words were clipped, and she didn't even glance down to check the book. The man's shoulders sagged slightly, and he gave a small, understanding nod. "Thank you," he said quietly. He turned to leave, but as he did, he couldn't help but hear the muffled chuckles and whispers that followed his departure. One of the young waiters muttered to another, "Did he think he could just walk in here dressed like that?" As he stepped back out into the cold evening air, the man took a deep breath. He had expected some resistance, but not outright dismissal. It was humbling, and the sting of humiliation lingered. But that's life, he thought, shrugging to himself. He had long learned to brush off moments like these. The next day, a buzz ran through Ladingo's even before opening hours. The owner, Mr. Lemieux, had informed the staff that an important guest would be arriving for lunch, someone who was considering a significant investment in the restaurant. This wasn't unusual for Ladingo's. After all, they catered to the wealthy and well-connected, but the promise of investment had everyone particularly on edge. By noon, the restaurant was sparkling, and every server was on their best behavior. They waited anxiously, each hoping to impress the mysterious investor. Just past 12, the bell jingled once more. The elderly man from the day before stepped inside, wearing the same modest coat and simple attire. This time, though, he was met with silence. The hostess paled, and the rest of the staff stared, unsure of what to do. He looked around, his face calm and almost amused as he observed their shocked expressions. "Good afternoon," he greeted warmly, his voice carrying an air of confidence that hadn't been there the day before. Mr. Lemieux, the owner, rushed forward, his face breaking into a nervous smile. "Ah, Mr. Quinn, so glad you could join us." His voice was filled with eagerness as he extended his hand. The man, Mr. Quinn, smiled, shaking Mr. Lemieux's hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. I wanted to see your establishment again before making any decisions." Mr. Lemieux ushered him toward the best table in the house, his words tumbling over each other in his efforts to impress. "We are honored, truly honored to have you. Our staff will ensure you receive the finest experience we can offer." As Mr. Quinn settled into his seat, he glanced over to the staff who had dismissed him the day before. Their faces were a mix of confusion and dread as they exchanged worried glances. Mr. Quinn gave a small smile, understanding their surprise. Turning back to Mr. Lemieux, he said, "The restaurant is lovely, but there's something I wanted to discuss with you before we move forward." Of course, Mr. Lemieux replied, gesturing for Quinn to continue, his eyes bright with hope. "You see, my interest in Ladingo's isn't purely about financial potential. I've always believed that an establishment's success depends not only on the quality of its food, but also on the character of its people." He spoke softly, but every word landed heavily on the staff who were listening. Mr. Quinn turned to the hostess, whose face had gone pale, her eyes wide with realization. "Yesterday I came here dressed simply, without much to indicate my status. I wanted to see how I'd be treated as an ordinary person. Unfortunately, I was dismissed without consideration and judged by my appearance alone." The hostess's cheeks burned with shame and she dropped her gaze, unable to meet his eyes. "I came in simply to have a meal, to see if the hospitality here matched the restaurant's reputation. But instead, I left feeling humiliated," he continued, his gaze steady on the staff. "If that's the treatment I received, I can't imagine how others might be treated." Silence hung heavy in the room. Mr. Lemieux looked mortified and he stammered, "I'm sorry, Mr. Quinn, that's not how we treat our guests. I'll make sure to address this immediately." But Mr. Quinn raised a hand, signaling him to stop. "I'm not here to see anyone punished. I just want to remind you and your team of something valuable." He stood, looking at each staff member in turn. "Every person deserves respect, no matter how they're dressed or what they look like. True hospitality means treating everyone with kindness and dignity, whether they're a billionaire or a farmer. The staff members looked at each other, clearly chastened. The hostess stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Quinn, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dismissed you like that. It was wrong." Mr. Quinn nodded kindly. "Thank you for your apology. I hope this will be a learning experience for you and the rest of the team. Remember, you never know who might be walking through your doors, and even if you did, every guest deserves the same welcome." Mr. Lemieux looked from Mr. Quinn to his staff, his face a blend of embarrassment and gratitude. "Thank you for giving us this chance, Mr. Quinn. We'll make sure that from now on, every guest is treated as they should be." Mr. Quinn's face softened, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "I have no doubt you will, and I look forward to seeing Ladingo's become a place where everyone feels welcome." He shook Mr. Lemieux's hand once more and gave a nod to the staff before turning to leave, leaving an air of humility and wisdom in his wake. From that day on, the staff at Ladingo's held themselves to a higher standard. The lesson stayed with them, a reminder that appearances are often deceiving and everyone deserves kindness and respect. And though Mr. Quinn didn't end up investing in the restaurant, he left something far more valuable, a lasting change in the way they treated others. This story gives a valuable message about humility and kindness. This is the story of humiliation, resilience, and unexpected revenge, showing how one man's modest appearance led others to underestimate him. But in the end, Ladingo's thrived, not just as a restaurant, but as a place of genuine warmth and respect, one that embodied the lesson Mr. Quinn had taught them.